So much for joining us on Right Side.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Glad
Definitely.
to be here.
And also, thank you for your service to this country. What are your thoughts about what's going on in Minnesota right now? And what organizations do you have that maybe are helping we the people out there?
Sure. So the first thing is I want to put everybody's attention on the real issue. The far left leadership in the Democratic Party has basically doing everything they can to distract from huge fraud, waste, and abuse, and that has huge criminal, issues with the leadership in Minnesota. And that's what this is. It's a big distraction kind of from the real issue. But here's something that we need to be concerned about because freedom of religion is a huge part of the foundation of our nation. And what happened here on Sunday at St. Paul's in Minnesota is not an isolated incident. And everybody needs to realize this. Here's the truth. The truth is far left extremists, they are targeting Christian and Jewish places of worship. This is not an isolated incident. On May 31st, 2020, St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C. was literally lit on fire and vandalized and defaced with graffiti. And that's known as the President's Church. On November 2025, attendees at the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan, New York City, were intimidated by far-left extremists who chanted "globalize the infidata," and "we need to make them scared." Because of that incident, then Mayor Eric Adams condemned the protest and issued Executive Order 61, and that was to regulate protests outside of houses of worship. So what happened after that? January 8th, 2026, Young Israel of New Gardens Hill Synagogue in Queens, New York City, was targeted by far-left extremists who literally stated, "We support Hamas," right outside the synagogue. On January 1st, 2026, what happens in response? The new mayor, Mandani, revoked Executive Order 61, a directive from his predecessor, Eric Adams, who focused on protecting houses of worship from harassment. Now look what happened here on Sunday, January 19th. You had far-left extremists who intimidated and interrupted a fundamental freedom of our nation, a founding freedom, the right to practice your religion freely without interference. Right? This is a huge issue. This is a huge problem. So one of the things that's happening now is churches, synagogues, places of worship, they have a legal right to hire security and use reasonable force to remove trespassers. Right? And so one of the things I'm offering is I'm a former SEAL, I'm also a lawyer, is I'm offering places of worship, churches and synagogues that would like to have tactical courses from SEALs like myself, or even temporary protection from law enforcement, veterans, or former SEALs, to reach out to me, and they can reach out to me at Warfighters Chamber of Commerce. Just Google up Warfighters Chamber of Commerce. You can contact us there. But they also have federal protections, and this is important for churches and synagogues to realize this, right? The Western District of New York Federal District Court held that a component of a church's autonomy is the selection of individuals who play certain key roles, specifically including teams of church members who volunteer to oversee church security. And that's a Western District, New York Federal District case known as Spencer v. Nigeria. Now, here's the issue. The court rejected New York's attempt to prohibit church security teams from carrying firearms, finding that their religious leaders have a religious duty to protect their flocks, and that the organic security teams act pursuant to a spiritual calling. So what I'm trying to tell, and Matt, thank you for your help, is I'm trying to tell these churches and synagogues who are absolutely being targeted by far-left extremists, this is a recurring pattern, that they had the right to protect themselves, they had the right to protect their flock, they had the right to remove trespassers. They have the legal right to do so. I've explained some of the case precedents for that, but I also want to give them the ability to move forward in that direction, and I think it's needed. And I'm a SEAL. I have lots of other friends who love our country, have served our country. I have lots of friends in law enforcement who would be willing to help them. Now, why I have your attention, Matt, one of the things I would also recommend is one thing is have cameras, have visual cameras outside the entranceways to your places of worship so that it acts as a deterrence. So anyone who decides they're going to target your places of worship, that you can collect evidence on them so they can be prosecuted later.
So let's talk about that. So there's different laws across the country for people that, intruders into homes and what you can do, what you can't do, all the things. And I'm not going to get into all of that now, but since you're a lawyer, let's talk about specifically places of worship. So are you saying that if someone was to come into a place of worship and they're attempting to steal, or they're attempting and they're doing something, pushing somebody, and we're talking about unarmed here, what within the law can the pastor or the parishioners do to that person if they're a threat to the flock under the law?
Okay, so they're an unarmed threat. So the first thing they should do, number one, is you have videos, objective surveillance. So they know they're being surveilled, they know they're being recorded. And that acts as a protective measure, not for the church, but it also helps gather evidence for state and federal prosecutors. That's number one, all right? Number two is you have the right to remove trespassers, right? You have the right to have parishioners or members of your house of worship who are trained and have the ability to, one, remove trespassers. Every bar has that ability, and it's practiced throughout the nation. And number two, what do you have to do? You have the right to make citizens arrest. If someone's stealing, if someone's abusing, assaulting, or destroying property, you have the right to make an arrest, a citizen's arrest. Now, one of the things I recommend is there's a lot of retired police officers out there. There's a lot of police officers, off-duty police officers, that likely had the ability to help in as far as with religious security of these places of worship, as far as veterans and like myself, former SEALs and special operators. I strongly encourage that places of worship, especially in some of these, I would say, high-risk type of areas like in Minnesota or New York City, or in some of these other cities that have, unfortunately, have leadership that have forgotten what the foundation and freedoms of our nation are about. And number one is free speech, but also the right to practice your religion without being intimidated and harassed. And that's what's happening. So absolutely, every church, every synagogue absolutely has a right to remove and use reasonable force to remove those that are intimidating, assaulting, or other illegal activities.
So those of you that are just joining us now, this is Bill Brown, a retired Navy SEAL, a lawyer as well. Let's go into just the personal side of before you became a Navy SEAL, what was it that you said, I'm going to join the United States Naval Academy, I'm going to join the Navy. What was it that made you do that, sir?
Well, to be honest, sir, I used a GI Bill when I got out. I am an Iraq veteran. I've always had a love for a country. And, I'll be honest with you, Matt, I believe our country is a beautiful place. I believe the values in the Constitution, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, due process, equality, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to protect yourself, I think those ideas are beautiful. I think they were beautifully transcribed in the Constitution. And I also think our nation taking great measures to meet those ideals. The Civil War, the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, and even the gay and lesbian movement. I agree with all those movements. I think it's happened now with cancel culture and the far left, is they believe that they're morally superior. And because they believe they're morally superior and intellectually superior as well, they feel they're justified to come and invade a place of worship and intimidate men and women and families who just are trying to worship and practice their right of free religion. Now, that our nation has to put a stop to that. That cannot happen. You cannot intimidate men and women and families who want to worship how they feel freely to worship. And this intimidation and basically it's real intimidation. When you sit outside a synagogue and you scream that you support Hamas, that's about as intimidating as you can get for those Jewish Americans. When you invade a Christian church and you start screaming at people and calling them Nazis, that's intimidation. That is horrible. That's not protesting. That's illegal activity. That's infringing on one of the fundamental rights that our nation was founded on.
Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. You know, that's exactly what we were founded on, our freedoms. Freedom of religion is exactly what you're talking about there. Again, thank you so much. This is Bill Brown, a retired Navy SEAL and lawyer. Sir, what is the specifics that people can reach out to your office if they want that tactical training at their house of worship? Can you share that with us again?
Yes, Matt, and thank you for this opportunity. There's two ways. Number one, you can reach out to me at Parliatory Law Group, William Brown, Navy SEAL. It'll pop up. Or you can go to Warfighters Chambers of Commerce. Just Google up Warfighters Chambers of Commerce. Contact us. Send us an email.